Chapter 1. A Quiet Stop Turns Suspicious. It was a warm summer evening as the bus hummed its way across the empty roads of California. Inside, Kinney sat quietly by the window, watching the dusty hills roll by, his backpack resting at his feet. He wasn't in a hurry. This cross-country trip was his way of hitting pause, of escaping the noise, the deadlines, the expectations. For now, all he wanted was a good night's rest. As the bus slowed down near a small town, Kinney leaned forward and asked the driver, "Hey, I think I'll stop here for the night. Is there a motel nearby?" The driver nodded without looking back. "Yeah, right across the river. Clean, quiet, not too pricey." Kinney smiled, grateful for the simplicity. "And there's a bus to San Francisco tomorrow?" "Every morning," the driver replied. "You'll be just fine." With that, the bus hissed to a stop, and Kinney stepped off with a soft thud onto the sleepy street. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and summer dust. He adjusted his bag on his shoulder, not knowing that just 50 kilometers away, in the streets of Los Angeles, a very different scene was unfolding. Outside a busy supermarket, a masked figure on a black motorcycle pulled up beside a security guard. The rider's voice was sharp and cold. "Give me the money." Startled, the guard raised his hands. Okay, he stammered, handing over the cash. The rider snatched it and sped away, tires screeching. But they missed one detail. Just above the supermarket's entrance, a security camera blinked quietly, capturing every moment. A flash of long blonde hair beneath the helmet. A black leather jacket. A quick getaway. Back in the supermarket's office, the manager picked up the phone with shaking fingers and called the police. "Yes, a robbery. It just happened. We have footage. Long blonde hair, motorcycle. We're not sure if it's a man or a woman." Far from the chaos, Kinney strolled across the bridge into the quiet little town. Streetlights flickered on as twilight fell. The river below shimmered gently, completely unaware of the crime that had just happened. As he reached the motel, a simple sign glowed in neon. "Vacancy." Inside, the man at the front desk barely looked up. "Room 23, he said, sliding a key forward. Kinney nodded. "Thanks." The hallway smelled faintly of cleaning spray and pine. His room was basic but decent. A bed, a small table, a soft chair by the window. He dropped his bag with a sigh and sat down, looking outside. The sky was turning dark, but in his mind things felt still and quiet. Little did he know, danger was not far behind. Chapter 2. The Girl with the Motorcycle. The motel was quiet, just like the town around it. Kinney was feeling the calm settle into his bones. He had unpacked, washed his face, and decided to head downstairs for a quick meal before bed. His stomach growled, the kind of tired hunger that only travel could bring. As he made his way to the small dining area, the door opened behind him. A sudden gust of air swept in, and with it came the distant growl of a motorcycle engine. Kinney turned slightly and caught a glimpse. A girl stepped inside. Tall boots, black jeans, and a leather jacket. Her helmet was under one arm, and as she walked forward, her long blonde hair fell over one shoulder in soft waves. She was young, confident, but quiet, and something about her made Kinney freeze mid-step. He'd never seen her before, or had he? The woman behind the front desk looked up and handed her a key. "Room 17, she said. The girl nodded with a soft thank you, her voice smooth and almost too calm. Kinney watched from a distance, eyebrows tightening. Her face, that hair, that motorcycle. Why did it feel like he'd seen all of it? But not here? The moment passed quickly. She walked down the hallway without a glance back, disappearing into the shadows beyond the reception desk. Kenny shook his head and sat down for dinner. But his mind wasn't with the food anymore. Where have I seen her before? Why does her face feel familiar? He reached for the salt, then froze again. The news, the robbery. The surveillance footage had shown a figure with a motorcycle and long blonde hair, a blurred face, yes, but something about the way the girl moved, her quietness, her calmness. Could it really be her? He leaned back in his chair and watched the hallway leading to her room. His pulse had quickened, though he didn't know why. Maybe it was just coincidence, maybe it was nothing. But maybe, just maybe, Fawn Danger had followed him here, and it was now staying in room 17. Chapter 3. Faces on the News. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the dusty blinds of Kenny's room. He blinked against the light, rolled over, and reached for the remote lying beside the bed. With a click, the small motel TV came to life, its screen glowing with early morning news. A calm voice filled the room. Last night, a supermarket in Los Angeles was robbed. The suspect is believed to be armed and may have fled the area. Here is a photo captured by the store's security camera. Kenny sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. On the screen appeared a blurred image, a black motorcycle. A figure in dark clothes, and just beneath the helmet, long, flowing blonde hair. His heart skipped. It was just like her, the girl from room 17. He stared at the screen as if willing it to become clearer. The image was grainy, but the hair, the stance, it pulled at his memory like a string being tugged from the back of his mind. Could it be her? He whispered to himself. The news anchor continued. We are still unsure whether the suspect is male or female. Witnesses describe a tall figure, calm, quick, and silent. Authorities are urging anyone with information to come forward. Kenny turned off the TV and sat in silence. That girl, Mel. He remembered her walking into the motel the night before. The way she moved, her calm expression, the flash of blonde hair against the dull walls of the lobby. She didn't seem nervous. She didn't seem afraid, but maybe that's what made it so strange. He went downstairs for breakfast, his mind racing. And there she was, already at a corner table, a plate of toast and fruit in front of her, sunlight casting a golden glow across her hair. She looked up and smiled faintly when she saw him. Is it her? Kenny thought again. Am I sitting near the robber? He hesitated for a second, then walked toward her table. Mind if I sit here? He asked casually. She looked at him, her eyes unreadable. Well, okay. He sat down slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm Kenny. Mel, she said, offering a quick smile. Pleased to meet you. Where are you headed? He asked. San Francisco, she replied, sipping her coffee. Later this morning. A coincidence or a getaway? Kenny forced a smile, but inside questions screamed louder than ever. Was she running? Was she hiding? Or was he just overthinking it all? As they sat together in that quiet breakfast room, 1,000 possibilities swirled between them. But only one truth waited to be discovered. Chapter 4. Stranger at the Table. The breakfast room was quiet, with only the faint clinking of plates and the hum of a small ceiling fan filling the space. Kenny sat across from the girl whose presence had unsettled his thoughts all night. Her name was Mel. She ate slowly, like someone who had no reason to rush, toast in one hand, a cup of coffee resting gently in the other. She glanced out the window between bites, calm and unreadable. Her long blonde hair caught the morning light in soft strands. It was almost too perfect, too peaceful. Kenny studied her carefully. She didn't seem nervous. She didn't seem dangerous. And yet, something still felt wrong. Or maybe not wrong, just off. As if there was a quiet current beneath her words, something left unsaid. "So," she said, looking up with a slight tilt of her head, "where are you from, Kenny?" "Boston," he replied. "Just traveling across America by bus. I'm heading to San Francisco today." Mel nodded, taking a small sip from her cup. "I'm going there too, but not by bus. I don't like them. I prefer motorcycles." That made Kenny glance down at her jacket. The same black one he'd noticed when she arrived last night. His thoughts flickered to the news report again. She continued, "Excuse me. I need to make a quick phone call." Before Kenny could say another word, she stood up and walked away, her movements smooth and controlled. The phone at the far end of the lobby was old, the kind with a cord that twisted like a lazy snake. Mel picked it up, turned her back slightly, and began to talk. Kenny watched her, but he wasn't the only one. Near the doorway, a young man sat alone at a table, half-finished coffee in front of him. He wasn't eating, he wasn't reading, he wasn't even pretending to look away. His eyes were locked on Mel. Kenny narrowed his gaze. Why is he watching her so closely? Does he recognize her too, or is he just curious? A strange unease crept into Kenny's chest. When Mel hung up the phone and disappeared down the hallway, Kenny stood up and walked toward the man near the door. "Hey," Kenny said, trying to sound casual. "I'm Kenny." The guy turned slowly. He looked to be in his 20s with messy dark hair and a jacket too big for the season. "Muir," he replied. "I'm Ned." They shook hands. Kenny hesitated, then leaned a little closer. "You were watching her." Ned looked surprised for a second, then glanced down at his coffee. I guess I was." "You recognize her?" Kenny asked. Ned paused. "I might," he said quietly, "but I'm not sure. I saw the news this morning, too." Kenny sat down beside him. "You think it could be her from the robbery?" Ned didn't answer immediately. His eyes drifted to the hallway Mel had just walked down. "Maybe," he finally said. "What do we do if it is?" Kenny felt the weight of the question settle on his chest. Because if she really was the robber, they weren't just sharing breakfast with her. They were in danger. Chapter 5, Secrets Behind Doors. Mel left the breakfast room with a soft, "See you later," her footsteps echoing down the hallway as she disappeared around the corner. The air felt heavier once she was gone, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Kenny remained at the table beside Ned. The two men sat in silence for a moment, listening to the quiet clatter of dishes being washed somewhere in the back. "She's leaving soon," Kenny finally said. "If she's the one from the robbery, she'll be gone." Ned didn't answer right away. He looked down into his coffee like it held answers. Then slowly he lifted his gaze and whispered, "Don't call the police." "Not yet." Kenny frowned. "Why not?" "She might be armed," Ned replied, his voice barely audible. "If she finds out we're suspicious, it could get dangerous. For both of us." Kenny leaned back, studying him. There was something in Ned's voice, something not quite right. Not fear exactly, more like calculation. It made Kenny's stomach tighten. He nodded slowly, then stood up. "Yeah, you're right. Let's wait." But as he walked away, one thought rang louder in his head than the rest. There's something off about Ned, not just his warning, not just his quiet stares, the way he avoided saying too much, the way he seemed more curious than concerned. It all felt like a performance, just like Mel's calm demeanor. Kenny knew he needed answers, and he had a feeling the truth wasn't going to come from a conversation. It would come from a room. Room 17, Mel's room. Back in the hallway, he waited for a chance. A woman was cleaning the nearby rooms with a cart full of towels and soap. Kenny approached her with a calm smile. "Excuse me," he said, trying to sound casual. "I locked my key in the room. Room 17. The woman looked at him, then nodded. "No problem." She pulled out a spare key and opened the drawer. "Thank you," Kenny said quickly, stepping inside. As the door closed behind him, the quiet of the room wrapped around him like a warning. It smelled faintly of perfume and dust. A leather jacket hung on the back of a chair. The bed was made perfectly, too perfectly, like someone was trying to erase their presence. Kenny began to search, slowly, carefully. Drawers, bags, under the bed, nothing. No money, no gun, no disguise, just the distant sound of a TV playing somewhere down the hall. He stood still for a moment. Maybe I'm wrong, he thought. Maybe she's just a traveler like me. Then the door clicked. Footsteps. Voices. Kenny's eyes went wide. Without thinking, he darted into the bathroom, pulling the door halfway shut. He held his breath. The door opened. Light footsteps crossed the room. Then her voice. Quiet, steady, too calm. "No, I'm still at the motel. Leaving soon. Yeah, an hour maybe. Everything's fine." A pause. "I told you. No one suspects a thing." Kenny's heart pounded in his chest. The call ended. Mel hung up and walked to the window. He had to get out. Quietly, Kenny opened the bathroom window and slipped through into the narrow space between rooms. He pulled himself toward the next window and climbed into room 18, but when he stood up, he froze. There, on the bed, lay a long blonde wig. On the chair, a black motorcycle coat, and inside a half-open bag, bundles of cash. Kenny's breath caught. It wasn't Mel's room, it was Ned's. Chapter 6. The Real Robber. Kenny stood frozen in the middle of room 18, his breath caught somewhere between fear and realization. On the bed, in plain sight, lay a long blonde wig, silky, neatly styled, the same shade and length he'd seen in the robbery footage. But this wasn't Mel's room. This was Ned's. That fact hit him harder than anything else. In the corner, a heavy black motorcycle jacket hung on the back of a wooden chair, its sleeves still creased like it had been worn only hours ago. And there, lying just beside the chair, a half-zipped travel bag gaped open, stuffed with stacks of cash. Kenny's pulse thundered in his ears. He wasn't wrong about the robbery. He was just wrong about who committed it. Not Mel. It was Ned. The quiet, calm, coffee-sipping Ned who warned him not to call the police, who looked him in the eyes and said they needed to wait. It was all an act, a mask. And Kenny had walked right into it. Suddenly, behind him, the doorknob rattled. A soft click, then a creak. The door opened slowly, and Ned stepped inside. He stopped, his eyes locked with Kenny's. And in that single moment, everything unspoken passed between them like electricity. Surprise, rage, and the sharp sting of betrayal. Kenny's mouth opened, but no words came. Ned's expression hardened into something cold, something unfamiliar. "What are you doing in my room?" Ned asked, his voice low, dark. But he didn't wait for an answer. In one swift motion, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small black pistol. "Don't move," he hissed. Kenny slowly raised his hands, backing away from the bed, his eyes flicking between the gun and the bag of money. "You're the robber," Kenny said quietly, disbelief lacing every word. "The one from the supermarket in Los Angeles. It was you all along." Ned gave a slight, bitter smile. "Very smart, but not smart enough." He stepped forward and grabbed the bag, tightening the zipper. The cash rustled inside like a heartbeat. He slung it over his shoulder without looking away. "You're not going to get away with this," Kenny said, more to buy time than out of hope. "The police are looking for you. Cameras got your picture." "I was wearing the wig," Ned replied coolly. "And now that you've seen this, I can't just let you walk out." And without warning, bang. A sharp pain exploded across Kenny's head as Ned struck him hard with the butt of the gun. His legs gave out instantly. The world tilted sideways. Light and shadow twisted. He fell to the floor, a dull ringing in his ears, the room dimming as if someone was slowly turning down the lights. Through blurred vision, Kenny saw Ned crouch beside him, placing something heavy against the door. "You'll be fine," Ned muttered. "Eventually." The last thing Kenny saw before everything went black was Ned walking out of the room. Calm, steady, as if this was just another day, just another job, just another clean getaway. The door slammed shut behind him, and then nothing. Chapter 7. Chase. Across the river. The morning sun hung low in the sky, casting long golden shadows over the motel courtyard. Birds fluttered across the river, and all seemed still, until a sudden shout split through the air. "That man!" Kenny's voice rang out hoarsely as he stumbled from the side of the motel. His clothes were rumpled, a thin line of blood trailed from his temple, and his breath came fast and panicked. "He's the Los Angeles supermarket robber. Stop him!" People turned, heads spun. For a moment, time held its breath. Then they saw him, Ned, rushing across the gravel, the bag of stolen money gripped tightly in one hand, the other fumbling for his motorcycle keys. He didn't look back. He couldn't. The only thing that mattered now was escape. Ned reached his bike, fired up the engine, and took off, tires screeching against the hot pavement. Gravel sprayed behind him like sparks, but someone else was already in motion. Mel. She had heard Kenny's shout from her room, and now she moved like lightning, down the stairs, around the corner, straight to her own motorcycle. There was no hesitation, no time to ask questions. She simply knew. If she didn't stop him now, he would vanish forever. She kicked the engine to life. The roar of her motorcycle echoed through the air like thunder chasing a storm. Within seconds, she was on the road, chasing him. The motel blurred behind her as she raced forward, her eyes fixed on Ned's black coat whipping in the wind ahead. He had a head start, but she had something else. Experience, instinct, and a stunt rider's heart that had never failed her. They tore through the sleepy town, past startled pedestrians and honking cars. Mel narrowed the distance with each second, weaving through the streets like a shadow. Up ahead, the river came into view, a wide stretch of water, calm but deep, glinting under the morning sun. Ned didn't slow down. He couldn't. The bridge was too far. The law was too close. So he made a decision. A stupid, desperate, dangerous one. He turned sharply, veering toward the riverbank. Mel's eyes widened. "No," she whispered under her breath. "You're not getting away that easily." And then she did the impossible. As Ned's bike raced toward the edge, Mel accelerated even harder. Dust flew beneath her tires. The ground shook with her speed. With flawless control and fearless aim, she angled her motorcycle toward the narrow embankment that curved out over the water. Then she leapt. Her motorcycle soared through the air, wheels spinning, hair whipping, her breath held mid-flight. In one breathtaking moment, she jumped the river. She landed hard on the opposite bank, right in front of Ned. His eyes locked with hers, shocked, furious, defeated. There was no time to turn, no space to stop. Ned's bike slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. His tires skidded, his hands lost control, and with a final cry, his motorcycle tipped sideways and flew into the river. Splash. The water erupted in waves. The bag of money disappeared beneath the surface. Ned flailed desperately, arms slapping the water. "Help! I can't swim!" he screamed. People began rushing over. Kenny arrived seconds later, limping, his face bruised but lit with relief. Mel stood at the river's edge, breathless but calm. "I'm okay," she said before Kenny could even ask. "And you?" "I'll live," he said, smiling through the pain. "Thanks to you." More motel guests gathered. A few men helped pull Ned out of the water, coughing and soaked, his perfect escape dissolved by river water and a woman who refused to let him win. Moments later, the police arrived, sirens wailing, guns drawn, orders barked. Ned was handcuffed, drenched and shivering, but silent. He had nothing left to say. Kenny and Mel stood side by side, watching as the officers took him away. "She really stopped him," one policewoman said. That was incredible." The other officer turned to Mel. "Do I know your face? Are you famous?" Mel gave a small, knowing smile. "Maybe," she said, brushing wet hair from her eyes. "I'm on TV sometimes." Kenny looked at her and laughed softly. "Now I remember. You're Mel Palmer, the stunt girl from Stunt Girls USA. I've seen you jump through fire and fly through glass. But today, you saved the day." Mel shrugged. "Just doing what I do best." They looked toward the sunlit road stretching into the horizon. "So," Mel asked, strapping on her helmet, "do you want to come to San Francisco on my motorcycle, or take the bus?" Kenny chuckled and climbed on behind her. "Let's take the bike," he said, "but this time maybe go slow." And with that, the two of them rode off together, leaving behind the river, the robber, and a morning they'd never forget.